What's on the front page of the Star? UDA launches big war against Raila campaign. President Ruto's allies' clarion call is that there is no room for negotiation with the opposition. Leaders marshaled to train guns against Azimio boss, discredit mass action. Crispus, at the end of the day, who should be worried? Azimio or Kenya Kwanza?
I think the person who should be worried most is the Kenyan, because when two big people are fighting, it's the ground that suffers. And in this case, it's us Kenyans who are going to suffer the most.
Yes.
Because at the end of the day is that when these two forces will come to a point where they may want to discuss or resolve these issues, they are the ones who will be the greatest beneficiary. All the destruction they'll have done will affect us as Kenyans, because our economy will be destroyed, our social fabric as a country will be destroyed. The policies that we have, the progressive policies that we have achieved will not have done so. So my biggest worry is as Kenyans, where is our place in all this? Because there seems to be, everybody has a strong position on an issue, but at the end of the day, nobody is talking to Kenyans. What is your interest as a country? What is more important? Because at the end of the day today, whether Raila has demonstration from Monday to Friday, what concerns most of us is, are we able to provide a meal on the table? Our kids who are, for example, in JSS, are they going on with their education as they are required? Are we able to access fuel as a country, because we need to move from point 1 to point 2? Are we having a proper and independent IEBC that we can trust in the next general election? Are we having the right men and women taking office as others are being kicked out? You know, so those are some of the issues that as a country we need to be more concerned with, other than the interest of politicians. Because as you focus more on the politicians, we lose sight on who is more important. The greater good belongs to the people of Kenya, not with the politicians.
Yes, the politicians are doing their job, Arnold, but do Kenyans have not had a platform to express their desire and their demand from the Azimio to the president, or memorandum from one region to the next? But Kenyans have not given their point of concern as far as, you know, all these things are concerned.
I think Kenyans have had an opportunity to express their mind, or rather express their opinion, and speak they have actually loudly. Just recently, we were in elections about 6 months ago. That was an opportunity to actually speak out, and they did. What then is required of politicians is that they also need to heed that particular voice. What is happening is that Kenyans have spoken, but a section of politicians do not want to listen to what Kenyans said. And I'm talking about both sides, because Kenyans gave a section of politicians a mandate to work. Are they working? Did they listen to Kenyans who gave them the mandate? And there are those who are told, wait, and have they listened, for example? I do not think that they have. You've said that politicians are doing their work. They're not. Is politics disruption? Is politics noise? Is politics tankering the economy? Is politics what we are seeing? Honestly, politics is much more than that. Even though these are some of the tools that are employed in politics, I do not think that what we are seeing is politics by excellence. Even in real politics, if you are to do political science 101, still this is not it. There's too much noise. For example, let's talk about mass action now that we are already into it. Mass action as a tool, what exactly, how does it work? Because when I inject you with a certain medicine, there is a place that medicine has to travel to, do something, and then there will be effect that answers to whatever we are trying to treat. So for mass action, there are two obvious places. Number one, it affects the economy, and you hope that once it affects the economy, a government of the day is not able to raise enough taxes to run their affairs, and then they will actually be forced to the table. Secondly, it could and can and actually has affected peace. Once it does that, then the government of the day is unable to govern effectively and therefore forced on the table. So through and through, as much as people would cheer for mass action as a tool that of course is allowable in law to some extent, not entirely, because you see, we are here talking about mass action. What does a normal person understand of it? Remember, all the thugs in the villages and everywhere else think that this is a golden opportunity. The other day, about 100 young people walked through Ngong Road, came through Valley Road, robbing people in the name of mass action. breaking windows and everything else. So exactly, how do you define that? So it's easy for politicians to hide behind legalities and terms as they are, but what is the net effect? So like he said, the people who are going to actually be hurt most are Kenyans. So the same people in whose name these things are being executed are the people who are going to be hurt most. So I think there's still so much to actually engage, and I think as a nation and the people, we need to call ourselves to parade and ask ourselves questions. Is this how we want to go? Victor, I want to ask you this. You should be asking the question, but I'll ask you this. What exactly should Raila and Ruto be talking about? For heaven's sake. Because there is a set framework passed by parliament, elected by a people, on how you go about bringing, or rather coming up with the IBC selection committee, right? The highest price that we have ever seen for flour was in 2008. The highest time we ever have seen fuel going up there was actually in 2008, where a liter of fuel was going for about 240. That is there on record. It wasn't William Ruto on set then. Last year with subsidies, flour was about 230, 250. Yeah. Cooking oil was about 500. Today, without subsidies, we are talking about 180 for flour, 180 to 150 depending on what brand and if you're going to the posho mill directly, and 250. But still, politicians are selling the narrative that things are so high from where they are. Of course, the cost of living, even if prices were low and you do not have that money, it's not going to work for you. But then, is what politicians sell, are what politicians selling the real thing? When eventually, for example, William Ruto sits down with Raila, will all of us be there? The worst thing is that somebody is actually pushing this, knowing too well that on 20th, somebody will die. We do not want to talk about these things, yet we know that every time we've gone.
Arnold, the way you're putting it, I mean...
As in, we know too well that people will go out of their way. We will have criminals and other. You have no way of prefecting this thing. And that along the way, some policemen will actually lose their cool or probably be hurt. And in the process, we could lose life on that particular day. But they are going across the country with complete abandon and hiding behind legalities and everything else. And when things go, I just want to ask you a final question. For example, we know of Baby Mutinda. We know of the other kid in Baby Pendo.
Baby Pendo, right.
When there was a handshake for over 5 years, did we talk about it?
That's the
antagonists were there, were together talking about peace and everything else. For 4 years, did we reach out to Mama Pendo? Did we reach out to Baby Pendo? Did we even talk to Msando's children and wife and settle that? For 4 years, we were unable to honestly reach out to Msando's problems and know exactly what happened? Or we want to use that now going forward? Yet we've had an opportunity for 4 years to actually have settled that and address that. So you see, the hypocrisy in these things is just up there, and we call it politics. That's not politics.
Crispus, at the end of the day, Kenya, a majority of people claim that we've matured politically and democratically, yes. Have we?
How can we say we've matured political and democratic? Well, the same faces that were fighting for democracy in 1992 are the same faces fighting for democracy today. If we had matured, then we need to have seen new faces, a new narrative, a new ideology being advanced for. Today we have 135 Kenyans who've died because of banditry in the North Rift. Why are we not seeing mass action being taken to North Rift so that we can say to compel the government and the bandits to stop fighting? Why is the mass action in other areas where...
That's the same question Arnold is asking.
Exactly.
What should the politicians talking about?
Because our democracy has remained the same.
Yes.
Our so-called democracy is still the same. It has not yet matured. If we have matured our democracy, then the kind of things we discuss here, the kind of issues media discusses, the kind of discussions we are having in our homes would be different, but it has remained the same. Today we have issues about freedoms that we are enjoying, but I think we are abusing those freedoms. And we may force any administration to start limiting those freedoms, and then there'll be more problems. We need to start understanding as a country that, yes, we are a democratic country, but as we continue misusing those freedoms, we will force this government and any other government in the future to start curtailing those freedoms, and we'll get into a worse position. So we need to start advancing a narrative that is progressive. Right now, our biggest problem as a country is the economic well-being. Livelihoods are being lost every day. Businesses are not able to sustain themselves. People are not able to provide for themselves. Kids are not able to get quality education. We don't know the situation in hospitals. We have not even understood what is the situation in those hospitals. We have a drought. So our food basket is a big problem. Why are those issues not being discussed in a sober manner?
Gentlemen, let me ask you this question, and both of you are going to answer, even you, Arnold. Imagine all of you sitting in that advisory council, you know, for both the opposition, Raila Odinga, and of course the president, and you're given a platform to advise the two gentlemen on what should be the priority. What should you present to the president and Raila Odinga as a priority on what they should be discussing currently? Starting with you, and then Arnold.
Number one, Kenya Kwanza had a plan, and we have elected them to be in power, meaning they have a plan to implement. So for me, I'll go to the plan and tell Ruto, this is your plan. What are you having a challenge in terms of implementing this plan? How can we help you to implement that plan? Then we go to Raila. You are not the president. You are not in the administration, meaning you are supposed to check this administration to correct it where it has gone wrong. What ways are you going to use to correct that administration? We have a parliament. We have the Senate. We have parliament. Why can't you go there and discuss these issues? Because that's where we elected you to go and represent us. We did not elect you to go to mass action or in the streets. We elected you to sit down in parliament, both Senate and National Assembly and county assemblies, and argue issues. Come up with laws that can be able to help advance Kenyans' economic progress. Come up with laws that can check corruption and other ills that are in government. Come out with laws that can be able to make sure that Kenya as a country will remain in the same position we are in the time Ruto took over, or even advance further. We want you guys to use the platform that we have given you to advance the legislative, representative and oversight role that you are. While the executive executes its mandate.
Yes, you know, this is like a mini public participation. What you've just what you're doing currently, because assume the president is sitting there and opposition leader sitting there, the two big boys, and now you are giving your memorandum. Arnold.
First of all, I know, whereas this is hypothetical on what we can do, I just need to also bring to the attention of this table that the way we are as a country, we are very polarized, that for the first time the church cannot sit down the two sides of politics, because would Raila listen to Ole Sapit, for example? Would he listen to Ainaina? Would the president on the other side sit down, for example, with Okoth? For the first time, the church does not have the authority. Normally, we will run to them as the ultimate refuge when it comes to reconciliation and sitting people together. The church seems to actually be divided, and you check around the Muslims, they also look like they are lost, especially with the way things are being done. So literally wherever we will go, so nationally, I don't think there is anyone who will sit the two gentlemen together, even as we try to actually advise them. Regionally, would William Ruto and President, or rather President William Ruto and the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga sit under Museveni, for example, or Mama Samia Suluhu? Would they? They wouldn't. Under Kagame, they wouldn't. Continentally, you see the problem in South Africa. If you go to South Africa, they will say Cyril Ramaphosa is Raila's friend. So he might not be able to actually sit down and help these guys. So then what is left is that because these are two Nilots fighting each other, we look for probably the senior most Nilot on earth, who is Obama. Who is Obama. And then, of course, now that is the other senior most Nilot on earth, and say, okay, call the two gentlemen together, because all of them from up north, now looking at it from that end. But then if we were to actually, like, if somebody were to sit down and talk to them, first of all, we need to understand Kenya Kwanza's the plan. Do you understand what the plan is? There is what was promised in the manifesto.
And the real execution now.
And now the execution, those things are worlds apart. We can start with the basic stuff. The promise to young people, for example, not achieved. The promise to women, not achieved. Yet we have copies of those particular documents that were launched with fanfare. So we need them to actually communicate the true plan. He's spoken about the plan, Do we understand as a people what the plan is? We do not seem to understand what they sold and what they are now delivering. So it's important. Let us start from that particular point. And normally there is a process of actually ensuring that you bring those things together. What you promise and eventually what then you execute, because sometimes the manifesto is not policy. That is the truth. We need to actually tell people that political manifestos are not policy. Those are aspirations, those are shopping lists. Once you get into power, you have to mainstream them into policy with the tools that do exist. So here, this plan needs to actually be sieved into Vision 2030, a medium-term plan for the next 5 years, so that then we know what it is. Have they released that? We do not have a medium-term plan. I think it should be MTP4.
What are they waiting for? Time is running out.
Yeah, that's 6 months down the line.
Yes.
We do not know exactly what the plan is, because we have seen what they promise and what they are delivering. They've been going around and they have got some notes, the economic team and everything else, that economic council thing. We do not understand, and that is the truth. Kenyans do not understand what the plan is. So first of all, we need that actually distilled.
Some would argue that government operates in an amorphous way.
No, that is not exactly. The reason why we have got a bureaucracy is that it has to be continuous. It should not be amorphous. The reason why a bureaucracy, the only way a bureaucracy will actually operate is by policies. So a policy is directly, we know that you are Victor, the other name is Oloo, and that you work at KBC, and that whatever way we go around, those will remain constant. So we need policy. This is a bureaucracy. This is not witchcraft. Governance is not witchcraft. So we cannot be in places where we don't know what they're doing. Truth is that we also have to accept that we do not know what the plan is. And probably William does not know what the plan is. He needs to come clean and tell us, okay, now this is what we have settled on. And the easiest way is that there exists a framework. So he needs to do that. On the other side, first of all, for Raila Odinga, it's important, of course, for him to strengthen the opposition. He's doing it, but he's doing it with the tools that we've seen in the past, some of them that could be destructive. He needs to coalesce people, to bring them together, and of course to harness the anger. But there should be politics of responsibility. We cannot act like once we are gone, we are gone. Two, he's done a good run as an individual. He's done so well for us as a country. We must never forget that. That when there was darkness, he wasn't afraid to stand out for us. But then, has he worked on mentorship? How many people will we say that he's mentored, especially the younger generation? Let us also not pretend that succession is not an issue. Those are issues that should actually be coming out of Raila's plans, succession, mentorship. And has he given us a scorecard? That is a position. No, a scorecard of the handshake that he was in. Do we have a scorecard? So that as Kenyans we say, okay, this is lessons learned and this is where we could go. So after that, then we can actually talk about now how they engage. Otherwise, the president needs to become the president of Kenya and not the president of Kenya Kwanza. That you should not forget. That we see a deputy president who is consistently acting like he's the president of UDA and not even Kenya Kwanza. We see a president who does not want to speak for other people. The president and his deputy must be the leaders of this country because they swore to defend the constitution of Kenya, not the constitution of UDA or Kenya Kwanza. The president must be the president of everyone.
Gentlemen, let me take another newspaper here, Daily Nation, before we cross over to Mombasa, where we have got Stephen Mogaka, Member of Parliament of West Mugirango. On the front page of the Daily Nation, public servants set to lose parks. Civil servants set to lose parks. Salaries Commission reveals that among those targeted for review are retreat, sitting and non-practice allowance, but acknowledges that its efforts to lower the wage bill have faced strong resistance. That is what's on the front page of the Daily Nation. Public Service Commission writes letter to protest move by salaries body. Public servants set to lose parks. Residents in bandit areas given 24 hours to move out. That was a directive from the Interior Ministry. The areas that the Interior Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki yesterday gave people living in forest, gorges and caves located in close to 30 areas that have been declared crime scenes 24 hours to vacate as the government launches the second phase of the operation to rid the North Rift of bandits. This follows, of course, the intelligence reports that bandits have moved their families to these and other areas to act as human shields. They are doing something more of guerrilla tactic kind of warfare. You use children and women as human shield away from, to shield the soldiers. But then, perhaps the government is also aware that this is what they're doing, so they are, going to use other tactics. Before we continue, let me also bring in Member of Parliament, Stephen Mogaka from Mombasa. Mheshimiwa, good morning from Mombasa. First of all, how is the coast region? Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Victor. Good morning, Kenya. Coast is dry and very, very receptive. And I'm happy to see the guest turnout in the coastal town of Kenya, and I think the tourism sector is picking up. I'm glad to be one of them.
Absolutely. You are doing what is called local tourism. Perfect. Now, we are talking about the issue of, the 20th day is soon coming in the next few days, 7 days. Raila Odinga was in Mombasa. I don't know whether you attended that rally, but if you did not, you belong to the Azimio. What is the game plan that Azimio is planning for the 20th day that is almost?
Thank you so much, Victor. Of course, I did not attend the rally because I'm on a working tour, and I did not make time to go for the rally. But what we are looking at is a country grappling with itself and its leadership, trying to learn the ropes, and clearly showing that we have not hit the cruise mode, if I can use the aviation language. The country is still at experimental stage, and we are all looking forward to when the amateur actors in our new government take a grip of the steering wheel and take Kenya where it deserves to be.
You call them amateurs? These are experienced members of parliament. Of course, the president is a
Oh yes, they are learners.
Okay. So let me ask you this question. So what next? Because at the end of the day, according to my guest in studio, the opposition should have their priorities right. Same applies to the president. What do you think should be the priority on the side of the president? Stephen.
No, the priority of on the side of the president, which he has missed the opportunity, was stability and continuity. Remember, Victor, government is a going concern. But we are being treated to a situation that the government is starting today, and that there is a cut-off from where we were, and we are having a new beginning. And we have not had any start of that new beginning. Because of that, the country will be in turbulence for a long time to come, until we eat humble pie and agree that there was government before the swearing in of President William Ruto, and that even after President William Ruto vacates office, there will still be government. The government of Kenya is a going concern, I keep saying. And where there is no continuity of institutions, and where you lose people with valuable institutional memory on how things have been working this far, I'm telling you, that is why I say that we have a government which as a learner's plate exhibited on their driving mirrors. And for a long time, sadly, we will have to do a lot of going round in circles before we hit the road running.
Absolutely.
So far now, it is a theater of the absurd.
Okay. You are a member of Azimio, and we've seen you accompanying Honorable Raila Odinga and other principals in so many fora. But then, what is the end game, according to Azimio?
I wish to correct you, Victor, that I'm an elected member of Jubilee party, and although we have not formally left the Azimio coalition, we are trying to chart an independent trajectory as Jubilee members of parliament and try to offer solutions disabused of the previous Azimio grouping, and also appreciating the nature of where the current government is at. But at the end of the day, the ODM leader, which he should always be called, is on the right trajectory in trying to make sure that the government is made aware that it has had a false start and Kenya is not able to wait, and where all sectors of the economy are not performing, where there is no takeoff in virtually all sectors of the economy, then there are those who used to be called hustlers and are going to realize that they are going nowhere. They are going to get agitated and they'll find a good following in Raila Amolo Odinga.
All right, Mheshimiwa, before I come back to studio, 2 questions. You said that as Jubilee members, you are pursuing a path to be an independent party within Azimio. Number 2, you've said that Raila Odinga should be called ODM leader. What do you mean by those 2 statements?
What I mean by that is that Raila Odinga was in an Azimio arrangement that he has not been able to sustain because, Victor, Jubilee Party is the 3rd largest party in Parliament. But justice must be seen to be done to the 3rd largest party and the biggest partner in the former Azimio arrangement. But unfortunately, the leader of Azimio, who should have been President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, and who is the leader of Jubilee, has taken vacation. And therefore, you cannot talk of Azimio without the 3 principles of Jubilee, ODM, Wiper, sitting together and engaging with their members to chart a course for Kenya. What is there now is a leadership by ODM, and which, as elected members of Jubilee, do not find comfortable at all. And that is why I am saying that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga should be speaking as an ODM leader, and we are hoping that when Jubilee get our act right, either get back our party leader to chart a way for the party, we cannot be speaking of Azimio at this point in time, and really that is what it is. If it has not been said before, get it now.
I get you, Mheshimiwa. Okay, just hang in there. I'll come back to you shortly, but with my guest in studio, gentlemen, before you continue, let me take you through the front page of the Standard before I forget. The hot mess that is junior secondary. The hot mess that is junior secondary. A visit to schools shows that lack of teachers, slow distribution of textbooks, additional levies burdening parents, and logistical nightmares as a result of the failed disbursement of capitation money is hurting learning in public schools. That story is fleshed out there for you on page 6 and 7. Ruto, Raila trade words on calls on defiance. Ruto, Raila trade words on calls for defiance. Angola to deploy troops to DRC. You are in DRC. Arnold, probably you'll tell us what is the situation on the ground there. Of course, we've had our own former president being an envoy. And Kindiki in new threat to eliminate bandits. Kindiki in new threat to eliminate bandits, of course, interior serious. Kithure Kindiki yesterday issued a 24-hour ultimatum to residents to vacate suspected bandits' hideouts in 6 North Rift regions. That is, Professor Kindiki also banned non-security aircraft travel in several areas. Okay. You've heard what Mheshimiwa has talked about. So that raises, briefly, before we continue the debate, is Jubilee quitting Azimio?
Definitely. By the past few weeks, the kind of activities you've seen in the Jubilee,
yes,
there are clear signs that, number one, Jubilee is a divided house. The elected members seem to be affiliated to work with government, while those who are not elected, who are probably holding the secretariat positions of the party, feel they need to remain with the opposition.
Yes.
So clearly, by what you've seen the Member of Parliament saying, even if he's not an authority in terms of saying the true position of Jubilee, those are enough signs. So wherever there is smoke, there is fire. So we just need to, it's a matter of time to see in what direction Jubilee is going. But definitely, clearly, there are cracks within Azimio, and definitely there are signs that Jubilee will be pulling out of Azimio. And if it doesn't pull out, it probably goes into some kind of arrangement where they'll be able to have some sort of independence. So we just need, it's just a matter of time to look at it and see.
Your take, Arnold. And as you answer that, do you think the former president was aware of whatever is now happening, and was Raila ready for this?
I don't think anybody in Azimio then, or the loose formation that is in Azimio, expected this particular moment, because there was this feeling that because we had a sitting president, and then of course you have got Raila Odinga on one side, you definitely were going to win. This, like we have said repeatedly, is not an election William Ruto won. It's an election Raila Odinga lost. As in, by all indications, it was that if you have got the state on your side and you've got Raila on that particular end, it was easy to win. But then William Ruto chose to go with the people, and he slugged it out to the very end. Of course, as much as the difference is about 233,000 votes, and of course the plus one is just about 66,000. That is a very tight and close election. But we should also respect the metrics we put in place, what we use to decide what is democracy. So where are we? I think Honorable Mogaka, and I wouldn't say that he doesn't have the authority to comment. He's an elected member. He's a ranking member of Jubilee, and he speaks very authoritatively and very, very clearly. So one thing that we actually had ignored is that the maandamano and the push by Raila Odinga is one way of trying to keep Azimio together.
Yeah.
Is one way for him, is a strategy to keep a crumbling house engaged, so that then he figures out what to do with it. But then like a lot of coalitions in this country and alliances, we always know what we want to go for, but we never think about what will happen to us. At least we don't manage loss easily. So when Azimio got whatever they got, how did they distribute? Because Jubilee in the House is actually aggrieved. And that has been said repeatedly, especially by members in the House, that a lot of leadership positions have actually been given to ODM, for example, even in places where they feel they should actually have gotten those particular positions. So you cannot do that and still expect that people are going to sit there and cheer you.
Yeah.
The people in Jubilee, for example, don't sit very comfortable with crossing over to Kenya Kwanza 100%. A few of them have, but remember where they've just come 6 months ago. This was the team that was actually hitting on UDA and the deputy president, who is now the president. So there's not so much warmth between them, but then they're also in a place where they have got a partner who's sitting on them. So what do they do? So clearly, what Sabina and the others have actually done, you've seen those photos, is that they are speaking what so many other people in the House are doing. But does Jubilee as a party have strength outside of Parliament? Strong, well, let's talk about strength that can actually be influential outside of the House. I see the Secretary General who doesn't look like he's very convincing. Every time, even
that's the same question I want to ask you, gentlemen. We see Jeremiah Kioni is still in touch with, with Azimio. But from what the Mheshimiwa is talked about is, they're looking for an escape route that once they find it, they'll bolt out.
And that's what I'm talking about. How did they manage the post-election setting? In this country, people really want to eat their cake and still have it. So you, for example, sit down, you sit on us. Like, for example, the coalition that Raila was in with Kinamudavadi.
Yes.
What's that name? NASA.
Yeah.
So you call Wetangula names, you take leadership from him and give it to Orengo, and still expect that Wetangula will sit there, and that when he moves out, he has betrayed you. What kind of logic is that? What kind of reasoning is that? That when you take away the leader of minority from Wetangula in the Senate, you give it to Orengo, call him names and humiliate him, you still expect Wetangula. What kind of exceptionalism is that? That you really wonder, the way we do politics and the way people really want to think that will work out. It's the same thing, that you humiliate elected Jubilee members in the House, take away leadership position from them, give them non-script positions, and sometimes even ignore them altogether, and still expect that they will support you going forward. You know, they have got a currency that the people who are outside of politics do not have. He has got legitimacy. When he speaks, he's an elected member of parliament. So he has got a currency Jeremiah Kioni does not have, even as an SG.
Yes.
When you guys are reporting here, and that is the point I actually was referring to, when you people are reporting here, you're going to talk about what Raila has said, you'll speak about what Martha Karua has said, what Kalonzo has said. And then, if there is some space for words, the editor will think about then sneaking in Kioni. Unless he becomes so dramatic and use that sufuria and it's not going to be, there's not going to be so much about it. So I think Azimio is completely dead.
All right.
And Mogaka says that Raila Odinga should be referred to as the leader
of ODM.
Of ODM.
Okay.
How clear can somebody speak? What, as in, you want it more louder than that?
Okay.
Yes.
Let me just get back to him once again. Mheshimiwa, you know, there's this question I've asked my guest in studio, and I also want to ask you the same question. Perhaps if you have Mheshimiwa back. Okay. I want to ask you the same question, but once we have him back, then I'll ask the same question. But gentlemen, all right, Mheshimiwa, the same question I want to ask you. Imagine you are sitting in the advisory council for both the president and Azimio leader. What kind of a question or priority in your list would you give the two gentlemen as we speak? Because all of them are speaking politically speaking. But what would you advise the president and ODM leader Raila Odinga?
That's to me, Victor?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, if I were to advise the sitting president at the moment, he knows, like all of us do, that his win was marginal. And therefore, the first business of the sitting president who has marginally won is to hold the country together. And you cannot hold the country together when the leader of peace, half of Kenya, is not settled. And if it's not settled, it therefore means half of Kenya is not settled. And there is a reason we put a public participation in our constitution. And if you want anything to succeed in this country, you must involve the public. And therefore, my urge to President William Ruto and my urge to the Right Honorable Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga is that Kenya is bigger than any of them, and it is just about time they involve the public in charting the way forward. I appreciate that Right Honorable Raila Odinga has chosen the mass way action of engaging the public. I do not know how President William Ruto is going to engage the public. Be it as it may, if Kenya is not pulling together, particularly at this time when all odds are against Kenya, then we will not be taking our country anywhere. The most important thing is that at this drought-stricken moment, Kenya needs to hold together, and we work together, create synergy, and be sure that we are attracting foreign investors, we are attracting foreign donors, and we are attracting that will make Kenya get out of the hole we have dug ourselves into through politics. And that would be my advisory. It's never too late. And I urge the Kenya Kwanza government not to think that by Raila leading in actualizing or manifesting what is in many Kenyans' minds and thoughts, he is not seeking for a handshake as he is usually easily rubbished. He is telling the government of the day that Kenya is hurting, Kenya is restless, Kenya is pained, and we need extraordinary actions at this moment to deal with the extraordinary moments that this country is going through.
Whenever you sit in your round table as members of parliament, whatever you discuss, what are some of the deliverables that you think Kenya Kwanza is able to achieve? And again, what are you handing over to the sitting regime to actualize its manifesto as was promised during the political campaigns? Mheshimiwa.
I missed you, Victor. I missed you.
Okay. You know, anytime you sit as members of parliament, right now you said that you are in a working tour to in Mombasa. Anytime you have a discussion as members of Azimio, what options do you have? You know, because you have got plan A, plan B, and plan C. What options do you have?
One, and I still repeat, when you say members of Azimio, you are misdescribing
you're a member of Jubilee.
A section of members of parliament.
Yes.
But be it as it may, whenever we engage as members of parliament, remember we have a country called Kenya. And we all have sworn our allegiance to the Republic of Kenya, and we have sworn to do what it takes to actualize our national anthem, that plenty be within our borders. So our first wish is, how do we get Kenya moving? The how is where there are divergent opinions, but as to whether we need Kenya to move forward, yes, we do. The trouble therefore then is that the government of the day has concentrated a lot of its energies at targeting people they perceive to have been sympathetic with the retired president. Yet those are the people who are holding institutional memory of what this country has gone through, and for continuity or for improvement, you need these people. Within 6 months, we have seen a corrosion of the entire holders of government positions in the previous moments. And that is what has dug Kenya into the hole it is in. And for the new members, and sorry for me to refer to them as amateurs, for the new occupants of key and vital state positions to learn the ropes, and we hit the cruise height, it is not going to be easy. And therefore, I can confess we will spend one financial year doing nothing other than musical chairs. And perhaps when the new favorite public officers and state officers get to settle to office and get to learn what it takes to run government, we will have lost quite a bit. And whether we take off from there, I leave it to the Almighty God.
You leave it to the Almighty God. Mheshimiwa, hang in there. Come back to you shortly. Okay, gentlemen, I want to talk about something that is also quite important to Kenyans, of course. We've talked about politics, but you know, at the end of the day, we also have to talk about matter security. Kithure Kindiki, 24 hours now is almost, time is now, and the new approach to tackle bandits in the troubled areas. Was that the right way to go?
I think to win this war, Kithure had to first get intelligence, know where these people are, what tactics they are using, what are their movements, who are their financiers, where are they moving these cows, what is the end game. I think he took time to do all that, and now he's probably in a comfortable position to make what we call informed decisions in terms of the tactics going to deploy. Unfortunately, there will be collateral damages, because if there are people who are using a human shield to protect themselves, definitely at the point where the curfew or this moratorium will come to an end, definitely we may find people being killed, innocent people being killed, because they are being used by the bandits as human shield, which is very sad. But as a country, I think, is it a price we are ready to pay to get that North Rift region secure? Probably yes. We have lost so many lives so far. It is time that we fight this battle once and for all, so that the North Rift can also become an economic frontier that can help this country lift its economic position. We are North Rift is next to South Sudan, Ethiopia, and part of Somalia.
Yeah, and
those are
Uganda.
areas we need to open up, make them peaceful, so that projects like Lapsop, where we have invested a lot, can also start seeing the benefits. You've seen a lot of the infrastructure projects that were done in the Uhuru administration. We are paying hugely in terms of debt for those projects, and we don't have foreign currency because we are not able to export as much, we are not manufacturing as much. So we need to open some of these areas so that we can also have enough that we can be able to sell out there to start repaying some of these expensive debts that we are holding from the last 10 years that we had the Uhuru administration. So if the North is holding that promise that we are able to open a very big region of our country in terms of being an economic frontier, so let us do whatever it requires to be able to do that. As we have seen, we are investing a lot of military support in Somalia. Yeah. Why can't we also invest the same military support to free the North Rift? Yeah. You understand? We are sending people to DRC Congo. Why can't we also invest in the same people to help us secure the North Rift? And the problem of the North Rift is political and also security in one way or another. So let us deal with the security issue. The political issue can be handled by the people.
Gentlemen, all of us have their cups there. Let's take a sip as we take a break. We'll be right back after this, shortly. All right. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us as well. So let's talk about the issue that is now, it's moving forward for the next couple of days or even weeks to come, is going to be on our lips. And of course, the issue of North Rift. The CS said that people who are living in the quote-unquote bandit areas were given 24 hours to move out as they're going to start their operations. Arnold, 24 hours, was it enough, or the government ought to have given them more time?
I do not think that the government did not speak from a place of consideration. Of course, putting into place strategic interests and tactical ones. I think administratively they've done proper mobilization now. We've got enough boots on the ground. I think they have hardened the other side of the hammer that is actually going to hit the anvil on the other end. So for this, I think the 24 hours that were given, there was consideration that it was enough time for civilians who have nothing to hide to leave the areas. I don't think that it's in the interest of government to hurt its own civilians. Yeah. The very reason why government is actually in that particular region is to ensure that there is calm for the people, not for trees and stones. So it's not in the interest of this government to harm these particular people. So 24 hours, I think, and there were measures on the ground to ensure that people have actually left, as in people who are not combatants. So that question might be a difficult one to understand unless you are Kindiki or the people who are doing that particular end. But as it is, I think the government is now ready to ensure that, number one, we deal with this issue once and for all. If there are few issues that you can tell even from a civilian perspective, that on the Ugandan border, the Ugandans have mobilized and that they have hardened their side of the border. Therefore, no one will actually be hitting on this side and running to hide on the other side. So that has been worked on. I think they ensured that that is worked out properly. Locally, I think there was heavy mobilization in the last few days, specifically for the military. And we know from other sources that special forces are now on the ground. And they are going out all out the Mount Elgon way. The things that you actually might not, we might not be looking at this particular point is that an operation of this nature is going to be long-term. It's not going to be short-term. There's going to be humanitarian crisis. So I hope that we have got measures to ensure that it doesn't bleed too much, even where it becomes difficult to avoid that. So it's going to be long-term. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I think this was the only way to go about it. There are not two ways of going about this, because this thing has been festering. It's a wound that has not been healing. It's been around for so long, and it's important that we camp on the ground, put in all the tools, the equipment, the resources that we have to ensure that we heal this. So when I talk about long-term, is that once you get to those gorges, the valleys and everything else, it's one thing to use kinetics to stop at least temporarily, the killings and everything else. But also it will take time to deal with the ideology, to deal with the socialization, to put in place infrastructure that then brings in a new society. So it's going to take a bit of time, but I think it's good. If there's anything that Kindiki can do that will go on his legacy, should be ensuring that the North is actually settled once and for all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mheshimiwa Stephen Mogaka, you know, from the analyst point of view, they have given their point. But let me come back to you as a legislator. A lot of allegations have been, floated around that, the infiltration of these illegal firearms and ammunition come from our bordering nations. What are you doing, or if at all, do you think the legislative arm of government should be doing something to talk to these neighboring countries to block their borders so that at the end of the day there will be no infiltration of illegal firearms and ammunition to, support the bandits?
Thank you so much, Victor. I hope I'm on air.
Right.
What I note in the northern frontier is that our territory is challenged. During this drought moment, the northern frontier is more stressed than the rest of Kenya, and that is what is triggering the heightened conflict that we have seen. Yes, I agree with you that illegal arms are inundating our northern frontier, and this weaponization of communities is what this country needs to look at and have a lasting solution about it. At some point, we say that if you don't arm the communities, then they will be overrun by the enemies when the enemies attack. And others argue that unless you de-weaponize the communities, you do not know when a community is defending itself and when they are bandits. In our eyes, we perceive gun holders as bandits, while in the local communities, they look at them as their warriors who defend them, and whenever there is a threat of aggression, they say they pursue the bandits into their territories. As a parliament, I know that we have enough laws that make it illegal for anybody to hold a firearm unless they are licensed. Many of those who are holding firearms in the region we are talking about are not licensed to hold those guns. But there is usually a justification, particularly from the local leadership, that unless the local community is armed, then they become vulnerable. It is a very delicate balancing because they are majorly along the border areas of this country, and where the bandits come from across the border and they raid communities within Kenya, then again a case is made out that you cannot leave those communities without armed guards or armed personnel or armed civilians because the policing of this country is not adequate to provide sufficient security. And what I urge Honorable Kindiki is to breathe in and breathe out and engage the leadership of these communities.
Yeah.
They know what is ailing them. And we seriously need alternative dispute resolution mechanisms for the communities in the northern frontier.
Mheshimiwa Stephen. Okay. Moving forward, all right, moving forward, let me ask you, yes, Crispus, at the end of the day, in the next couple of days or weeks, with operation starting today, of course, with a lot of collateral damage bound to happen, we saw what happened in Mount Elgon. The LRM was taking charge, and with their leader, Matakwe, way back then, I think way back then when Saitoti was the Minister of Interior. And that area was completely pacified. The North Rift region has been in the lips of Kenyans for so many years, including the last regime. We saw Matiang'i having several meetings with local leaders, members of parliament. Some of them were arrested, arraigned, and ultimately released. But nothing happened. And now, military is on the ground. What should we expect from now moving forward? With the collateral damage or not?
You see, if you look at the history of this matter, it started as a cultural practice. That's what it was tagged then. Then we started hearing murmurs of being a commercial interest affair. Then commercial interests always look for political protection. So now politics has come in, where we have now politicians being accused to be the promoters and protectors of these commercial interests. And now we are now turned to the military to solve this issue. So I think once we have to invite the military, then the military should provide a permanent cure, where we shall never find commercial interests bringing issues of banditry in the North Rift. And once the military lives there or decides to stay there, then we need to find that area changing in terms of the social structure and economic structure of that area, so that the people that can come out of these military operations, whether it will take 1 year or 2 years or 5 years, is a new breed of young people and families and people that are focused on now finding new economic opportunities to find livelihood in the North Rift outside the business of banditry, so that the North Rift can now become another frontier for the Kenyan people. We're talking about 30-40% of the Kenyan landmass being not accessible for any economic activity other than banditry, which is also another economic activity being promoted by politicians who are their own selfish interests. So if we can use the military to cure this issue of banditry, but provide an alternative way of life in that area and bring in a new social way of living, then that would be the best thing that we can do. So that even if we incur a huge cost now, there is a bigger price of reward in terms of the next 50 years about this area that has suffered for the last 50 years of no development, cultural practices that have now become banditry practices that are killing people. And I think if we are going to use the military, can we find a permanent solution from them, so that we don't say we send the military and they failed. In Mount Elgon, we have peace. There are people now enjoying the economic livelihoods there because of the peace that the military provide. Can we have the same in the North Rift? Yes.
Arnold, as you respond to that, anytime you want to kill a snake, first of all, you start with the head. You don't start with the tail. And in the past regime, they really tried, to bring some of the political leaders to book. A couple of guys have been arrested. They tried to cordon off some areas, curfew, but that never bore any fruit. We've seen Mount Elgon, peace prevailed. We've seen the Mungiki scare way back, peace prevailed. We've seen, Operation Linda Inchi, now Kenyan soldiers moved to Somalia. There is some relative calm in Somalia. In fact, some people say that some parts of Doble, when you go there, it's a whole new world. The beaches, people are now enjoying their lives. But now when you come back home, there is that small pocket of scare in the north, and now it has now been called as terrorism in 2023.
The problem, or rather the challenge with security operations, is that sometimes the way it's reported and the reality on the ground are normally worlds apart. A lot of times something that is actually built to be cultural, to be ideological, you will actually go down and realize it's actually economic. I'll just give you an example. A lot of times, for example, we do not do justice to the journalism that we do as a country because people do not follow through. For example, do you remember there was a time when there was a lot of insecurity in Bungoma? And there were killings, and people were saying people were crossing over from Uganda and coming on this side, and there was an operation all over. And it's still, even when the police were on the ground, there were still killings here and there. How was that handled? Outside of the SPLM thing, it's about land defense, the SDLF thing. Then there was some killing in Western, in Mumias specifically, Mumias and Matungu, and it was in the news and everything else, and it was looking like it was a bigger thing. Did we follow through to know? Because the people on the ground who finally handle it do something that you will actually call a critical factor analysis. If you go back and you look at the reports that actually handled that, or rather brought those things to conclusion, you realize that what was reported and what was happening were not the same. Like the initial issue in Bungoma, for example, were just about 3 individuals who had been in the same cell. they came out and they wanted money to pay lawyers. And they realized that the only thing they knew was going out there and robbing. One of them was in Mumias, the other one was in Bungoma, and the other one was in Busia. And that they terrorized a whole region as they looked for money to pay lawyers. But what did the media report during that particular time? We even, the current speaker was actually even brought in, then I think as an MP or as a senator, was actually brought in, and there was casing, and he had to write statements, and people were talking about people keeping militia. When eventually, how it was cracked, it was just 3 individuals who were looking for money to pay lawyers, but they were terrorizing the whole region. Did we look at what was happening in Mumias, for example? So we can bring in a lot of issues, and every case is separate. So when you talk about culture, for example, he raised the issue of culture here. My great-great-grandfather died in a cattle rustling expedition. So cattle rustling has been there as long as we human beings have known how to domesticate animals. But does it still proceed? Am I a cattle rustler today? No. Do I come from the North Rift? No. In fact, I'm a Bantu. So cattle rustling has been across. Whether you are Bantu, you are Nilot, you are Kushite. In this region, cattle rustling was part and parcel of our culture in the days of old. So even as we get into this, first of all, governments have not been serious when it comes to deal with the issue in the North Rift because of political expediency. I am hoping that this time round, it's very, very important for them to actually settle this. For the simple reason, like I've told you, that do we put the best of the resources that we have and equipment when we are dealing with these issues? We've not always done that, because I was telling you, Offset, that when you ask the officers commanding stations to give you officers to go on the ground during an operation, what an OC is going to do is that he's going to give you the Sumbua officers, those guys who don't show up on time, the guys who don't show up in court when they are sent to represent, or rather to speak on issues they should be managing, people who are always having issues with their landlords. You know, we've got a lot of that in the services anyway. So when there is an operation, an OC is likely to mobilize those Sumbua guys and put them in uniform and give you. A lot of those guys get on the ground and they are junk. They're not doing good work. That's why you hear there's heavy police presence, and you know, this guy has not even been effective in his own station. You don't expect him to be effective during an operation. So for a lot of operations, the OCs, the officers commanding stations, divisions, and everything else, use it as a punishment. So when you put in the best equipment like we are putting in, when you send in the GSU, RDU, as to you taking the special forces like we are now doing. Now we've actually taken this thing seriously. The same way we decided to deal with Matakwe's issue. It was an issue about people who were aggrieved in how land was actually given out. They didn't have any other way. In an area that is actually affected by bandits, I am elected by a community there that are actually victims of bandit attacks. You want to actually tell me that I will not help my people either to fight against it, and sometimes you do not have the capacity to control. If you are to give people money to defend themselves, you know, an offensive weapon, a defensive weapon can easily be switched to offensive, very, very easily. That is why people say that if you're going to do nuclear energy, you could say, okay, we are doing it for peaceful missions. But the engineer here will tell you that it's a very small tweak between generating energy and forming a nuclear bomb. It's not so defensive can as well be offensive. Depends on how you decide to employ it. So, do you want to tell me that even if I were to be elected a governor in those particular regions today, that I will not be forced by circumstances and self-preservation because I still want to be the leader of these people, for example, to stand in? So, some of these people we are forcing and we've been arresting are not necessarily the head of the snake. But it's a situation that has festered in for so long that anyone who finds himself in that particular lake, it's already salty, you have to become salty yourself. So we have to deal with the situation as is on the ground. Otherwise, we will go around, arrest these members of parliament, do headlines around it, but we never go to the bottom. And after the issues have been dealt with, for example, who has done a postmortem on what happened in Mount Elgon? Who has done a postmortem on what was happening just a year ago, 2 years ago when Malala was being arrested, Rashid was being arrested in Kakamega, for example? Has anyone gone to that and asked the people who dealt with it, how did they deal with it? What were the lessons learned? How can we apply the same in future? Because sometimes we sensationalize. When those things are happening, we get out of our hand and sensationalize these issues. Yeah.
All right. Gentlemen, as we come to a close, let me ask you, Mheshimiwa Stephen, what is the voice of Parliament in this operation as it begins today, and of course is going to continue for the next few days? I don't know how long it's going to take, but the government is hell-bent that this is going to be the end of that issue in the North Rift. What is the voice of Parliament in this operation?
Thank you, Victor. Parliament has a committee in charge of security, and I'm sure it is properly seized of this matter. What I know for sure is that militarizing conflict within the borders is not a solution. And as Parliament, of course, we have the legislative power to authorize the military to go on any assignment. I do not remember, before I came down Mombasa, I do not remember whether Parliament has ever authorized the military to undertake an assignment within the borders of Kenya. And as a management student, I know that conflict has a cause and effect. The wrong way to resolve conflict is to react to the effect. And the best way to resolve conflict is to establish the cause and address that cause. To my lay mind, what we are having in the North Rift is a conflict triggered by a resource conflict over access to resources or distribution of those resources. And if that be the case, and politics is about resource distribution and control, then I am lost at whether the military being deployed to deal with this situation is going to bring a solution. And we are only creating a hardened situation where a market for more sophisticated arms is going to grow, because the more you deploy the military, those who feel aggrieved will have to look for equally sophisticated weaponry to combat and or engage the military. And don't forget, Victor and Kenyans, that where the conflict is going on at the moment are areas which border our neighbors. And it is very easy for those you call bandits, but who are called warriors by their own, it is very easy for them to retreat to neighboring countries and then come back to attack when they know it is strategically safe to attack and attack successfully. My take is, as Parliament, if called upon to do legislative intervention, I am sure we will stand to the occasion, but that has not come. But I wish all the best for those who are going to be deployed as military officers to deal with this situation. I also do hope that the Human Rights Watch will be equally deployed there, because we do not want, when the military get there, they start attacking the immobile, old, frail and aged, and the women and children that have been left in their houses, because I know those we call bandits and elsewhere are called warriors will be in their military holes and not easily spottable by those we are calling military. At the end of the day, as a country, we need a pacific settlement of disputes rather than go to military combat, because violence or war only begets war. And it is really tragedy that Kenya is going to start its civil war from the northern Kenya. I pray and plead that Kenyans be human and know that we need a country, and may peace and prosperity be the beacon of hope as we commence this undesirable militarization of local conflict.
All right, Mheshimiwa, before I let you go, I'm made to ask you that it's Monday. We are at work. What are you doing in Mombasa? It seems you are you on holiday or something? Please share with us.
No, I'm not on holiday. I wish I would be on holiday. We have just the other day, yesterday, concluded audit committee capacity building. And today we start the IGAD conference that is going to culminate in the ratification of a possible protocol that will guarantee free flow of goods and services within the East African and larger African state. And while we are doing this, it is really tragic that we are talking of conflict within the borders of Kenya, when as a state we are hosts to the IGAD conference and possibly being very, very critical actors in actualizing the African Free Trade Agreement. Yes, I'm on official duty, a call for country. And I thank you for inviting me.
That's a good one. No, I know the people of West Mugirango are happy that the Mheshimiwa is working and you're not on holiday. But lastly, what are the key pointers for that IGAD meeting now that you are trying to deliberate on how to open our borders? What are the key pointers, Mheshimiwa?
It opens today, and it is bad to let the cat out of the bag ahead of the commencement of the protocol. But you know that our neighbors have been in conflict most of the years, and that has impeded the actualization of the African Free Trade Agreement or free flow of people, goods and services across Africa. And if the IGAD region embraced peace and stability, it will go a large way towards actualizing this dream for Africa. And it just coincides with what we are talking about Northern Kenya. How do we allow free flow across our neighbors when we are in conflict? And it is this kind of it is on this kind of note I am making a plea to Kenya and the actors who are fueling the conflict in the Northern Rift, that you may think this conflict is local, but it has international negative repercussions for country. And if that were reason enough, I would rather see peace prevail as we come out by the end of this week with the signed protocol that allows Kenya to receive people in and out, as we allow Kenyans to go out in and out and eke living anywhere in Africa and indeed anywhere in the world.
Perfect. Now we know you are in Mombasa on our King Tour. Mheshimiwa, thank you so much for that, and of course for giving us that insight on what you should be expecting. Of course, some good things coming out of Mombasa. Perhaps at the end of the week we'll keep in touch so that you can give us more update on what Kenya and other nations shall have signed out of that retreat. Thank you, Mheshimiwa. That is Stephen Mogaka, who is Member of Parliament of West Mugirango constituency, joining us live from Mombasa County. Gentlemen, 30 seconds each. I'm told we are running out of time. Your parting shot, kindly, starting with you.
My parting shot is for the opposition to have its acts together, come up with serious issues they want to address with the government, and find sober forums to engage the government, rather than pushing us to mass action, which is going to be expensive. It's going to have loss of life, loss of livelihood. We don't want to go to that direction. The president should also open his doors to discussion with the opposition, so that we can have a conversation as a country and find a charter way forward.
Arnold, thank you.
A very quick one. First of all, it's important to say this, that in the north, where the military and the government is actually trying to solve a problem, there is already a hot conflict. There is no way of going about it other than, first of all, using kinetics before we get to the very end. So we only pray and ask that they have got an end-to-end solution and framework in place, because you cannot recite poetry to somebody who actually is holding a sword. So on the other side, the people we are dealing with are already shooting and killing people. We can't get there and talk any other thing. There must be a balance of fire here. And that who has got the monopoly of violence here? The government must rein in, and the balance of fire must be on the government side. So, be that as it may, let no one actually question. I've heard Mheshimiwa talk about militarizing not being the solution and everything else. It's a hot conflict. There are no two ways about it. Two, and last for me, there is nothing the president and the former prime minister are supposed to sit and talk. It's difficult to quantify anything. They will sit down and talk. The only thing they should do is that each and everyone should do their job. The president should be the president, and the former prime minister, if he chooses to play oppositionist politics, he should do oppositionist politics, at least within the ambit of the constitution.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That's all we had time for. And of course, your comment and contribution is always valued. Thank you so much for coming over to the show. And of course, Team Mombasa, led by Shadrick Makolo, camera person, and the entire team there, led by our producer. Thank you so much. Stephen Mogaka, Member of Parliament, West Mugirango, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Crispus Wathimba, an engineer and political analyst as well. Karibu sana, and thank you so much for coming over. And Arnold Maliba, asante sana, brother.
Asante.
All right. Okay, that's where we wrap it up on Good Morning Kenya. Thank you for being a part of the show. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. But for now, it's a good morning. Bye-bye.